So I'm Natasha, and I'm on the Skype for Business engineering team. And today I'm going to talk about best-in-class authentication for Skype for Business and Teams. So when I say best-in-class authentication, what I'm talking about is modern authentication. So just to let you know, in this session, basically what I will be covering is what is modern auth, why it's important to you guys, but the majority of it will be how it works, okay? And like what we support and what we don't support and what's coming, all right? So that's what the session is about. And I will also touch on Teams and what is supported there as far as modern authentication goes, okay? All right, let's get started. All right, so that's what I talked about. What is MA, what's supported, what's coming in the future, and I'm going to go through a lot of details about the authentication flow. All right, so first, let's talk about some terms. So what exactly is modern authentication? That term is Microsoft's implementation of OAuth 2.0, which is an industry standard protocol for authentication. When we say modern authentication, we're talking about using that protocol for our client-to-server authentication, okay? ADAL, ADAL, stands for Active Directory Authentication Library. That is the library that sits on the client that enables modern authentication. So that library is created by our identity team, and it is embedded in all of our clients that are modern auth capable or ADAL capable, okay? So what modern authentication does is it does provide a better, more secure protocol for doing authentication. Specifically, what it does is not send the credential over the wire, the password over the wire. Instead, it uses tokens. But really, as a customer, what you're interested in, I mean, the protocol is important, but what the protocol does is it enables a bunch of features, okay? And the features that are enabled are cert-based authentication, multi-factor authentication, conditional access, and MAM, mobile application management. So in order to use any of those features for Skype for Business, you have to have modern authentication on. You have to have a server that has it capable and clients that have it capable, okay? I find a lot of confusion between those terms. They sometimes get used interchangeably, and it really matters what you're asking for, okay? So let's go through what those features are. So cert-based authentication, what it does is it provides you a way to log in using a cert instead of using a username and password. More and more companies are going to non-password authentication, and this is one option that you have. Multi-factor authentication enables you to force your users to do more than one factor for authentication, okay? That factor could be cert-based authentication, or cert-based authentication can be a second factor. It's kind of up to you how you enable your environment. About multi-factor authentication, there are two ways to turn it on in Office 365. There's one way that's through, you get to it through the Office 365 admin portal and through in AAD. Basically, that way, if you do it that way, what you're doing is you turn on MFA for that user for all of their apps that they're using. Okay, SharePoint, Exchange, SFB, all of them, all right? The other way to do it is to use conditional access. And if you use conditional access, then you can do it by application. So I can say, if you're doing Skype for Business, I want multi-factor, but if you're doing SharePoint, I don't, okay? And then lastly, MAM, mobile application management. What this allows you to do is manage the application on the mobile device instead of the entire device, okay? More and more companies are going towards that because End users don't like it. Like if I bring my own device to my company, I don't really want my IT department to control my entire device, okay? But you can control the corporate application that's on the device. That's what MAM gives you. So those last two things, conditional access and MAM, they are provided by Intune. So if you turn if you have modern authentication in Skype for Business, you can use these features, but in order to use the last two, you will also need an Intune license, okay? Because that's how it works. All right. So at a high level, so I get asked all the time, does XYZ feature, does Skype for Business support XYZ feature? I would love to tell you then the answer is yes or even no, but the reality is it's actually more complicated to answer that question, okay? There are 3 different dimensions that you have to look at in being able to answer that question. So the answer is it depends, and it depends on the exact feature that you're asking about, the client that you're asking for, because we don't support all the features on all the clients, and it depends on the topology that you're asking about, okay? So those are the features that we just went through. Those are the clients. And here are the topologies: online, hybrid, and on-prem, okay? Now, the topology is the most important part, is what I found. It's also the most complicated. And that's what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about today, all right? Okay, so what is supported today? So first, I'm going to talk about those first 2 boxes, the features and the clients, and then I will talk about topology. So here's the matrix of what Skype for Business supports today as far as which clients and what features, all right? This one, cert-based auth on Mac, that's actually coming out next week in the latest release of our Mac client. So it's not quite out yet. Anyway, that's that. I'm not going to go through the details here. Now, let's talk about topologies. So the first thing that you have to understand is you can't just look at the Skype for Business topology, okay? You also have to look at Exchange. The Skype for Business client is not just a client for the Skype for Business server, but it also logs into the Exchange server to get meeting information and calendar information and all of that awesome Exchange integration functionality that you're used to in Skype for Business. So to answer this question, you have to look at both of those things, okay? All right, so I'm going to go through the topologies now. So to start with, online. Okay, what do I mean by online? What I mean is Skype for Business is online, Exchange is online, and you have modern auth turned on for both of them. So here's a visual of that topology, and I want to explain how this visual works. So everything, does this work? I can't see it. All right, doesn't matter. Everything above the blue line, that's online. Everything below the blue line is on-prem. If it's grayed out, that means that it doesn't exist, okay? So this topology is Exchange online, SFP online, modern auth turned on for both, all right? So this is available today, and this is a fully supported topology. And by fully supported, what I mean is that matrix that you saw in the previous slide with all the check marks, all those check marks apply to this topology. So if you're in this topology, all those check boxes you can use, okay? Whoops, there we go. Okay, hybrid. Let's talk about hybrid. First of all, what does hybrid mean? Because lots of people use that word in many different meanings. So what I mean by hybrid is that you have configured your Skype for Business and/or Exchange to be in hybrid mode. So that means that you've got a single tenant you can have users online or on premise, all right? It actually doesn't matter if you have users online or on-prem. What matters is if you've set up the topology. That will become more evident as I continue. But, and so practically speaking, for Exchange, what it means is, did you run the hybrid configuration wizard, okay? For SFB, it means, have you turned on shared SIP address, okay? And there are other things you have to do to set up hybrid. But if you set up that hybrid configuration, that means you're in hybrid, okay? Now, so the other variable that we have to consider in hybrid, so you have to think about whether Exchange is hybrid, whether SFB is hybrid, and then also whether you have, where you have modern auth turned on. Because in that hybrid configuration, there are 4 servers that you can turn it on for, okay? Exchange Online, Exchange On-Prem, Skype for Business Online, Skype for Business On-Prem. And your user experience and whether you're able to turn on modern auth for each one of those boxes varies, okay? All right, so here's the visual. So you can see I have all 4 boxes. Today, this is what we currently support. We support Skype for Business on for the online servers and off for the on-prem servers. All right, this is supported today. However, one thing you have to know is, so your clients will be able to log in with modern authentication, and you'll be able to use all the modern auth features, but you may get multiple prompts. The reason that you get multiple prompts is because if you look at this diagram, I don't know if you can see my laser, but see on the bottom here, you see the on-prem servers, they use on-prem identity. That triangle is to represent your identity, okay? And the online servers use online identity or Azure Active Directory, all right? Which identity the servers use makes a difference in how many prompts you'll get. Because this configuration has 2 different ones, your users may get multiple prompts as they log in, okay? Another key for this is that you need a reg key on the Skype for Business Windows desktop. It's called allow ADOL for non-link independent of link. I know that's a mouthful. We have documentation on it. You don't have to remember that. And when you're in this configuration, so users that are homed online will be logging in with modern authentication, and therefore they'll get you can use the modern authentication features for those users. But the users who are on-prem, you cannot do that for, okay? So down at the bottom, I have a link to a supportability article that was written a couple of months ago, that was published a couple of months ago, where I go through, it uses these exact same visuals, okay? And it goes through multiple flavors of these and explains what's supported, all right? So I highly recommend that you guys go look at that and give us feedback if it's not clear enough, because I want to make the information available to you accurate and clear so that you can get the be able to understand what's available to you or not. So hybrid overall, I consider it partially supported. The reason I say it's partially supported is because I cannot turn on modern auth on the on-prem servers yet, okay? So in my mind, to make this fully supported, I need all 4 of those to have modern auth turned on. And that's one of the things we're working on. I'm going to go through that in a minute. But today, this is what's supported. All right, on-premise. So about a year ago, actually more like 18 months now, we released support for this topology, meaning you have Skype for Business on-prem, Exchange on-prem, and modern auth turned on for Skype for Business on-prem, okay? In this topology, so we do support this. I consider it limited support. The reason is because this is only supported on the Windows desktop client, no mobile clients. And it doesn't provide any Exchange integration features because Exchange doesn't have modern auth turned on. All right? So, so it's very limited. Okay, now let's switch a little bit. So that's what we support in general availability today. What's coming in the near future, okay? So what we are working on is supporting this topology, so basically enabling full support for hybrid, meaning modern auth is turned on in all 4 of the servers. All of your users, regardless of where they're homed, are able to use modern authentication features, okay? And we are also working on full support for on-prem, meaning if you only have on-prem servers, you can also use modern authentication. Now, so what this will do is provide you, allow your on-prem users to also use those features, okay? Now, if you were really paying attention, what you'll notice is that there's there's some things in this topology that are a little bit different. And basically, what's different is that these lines that go from the on-prem server to identity, they're using online identity, okay? I'm going to talk about this a lot more in my future slides. But so the architecture here, the design is different than the way that we've tried to solve this in the past, and it's important to understand this. Anyway, so this is what's coming, all right? The support for this has been in TAP, NDA TAP for the past 4-ish months, and we have made progress, okay? And if you are an NDA customer and you are interested in these, I would love to have you part of the TAP program if you're interested. And if you meet the prereqs, which I will talk about later. Anyway, because we need more validation of this. So what I'm happy to announce is that today we are announcing public preview support for Skype for Business MA on-prem, all right? So I cannot, even though I cannot yet support the entire configuration, if you only have Exchange Online instead of hybrid, then we're going into public preview, okay? And if to go register for public preview, you go to aka.ms Skype preview, you will see a new program there, and you register, and then we will send you instructions on how to do this. We really want to know who you are so that we keep in contact with you so that we get the feedback and we can help you solve problems if you run into them. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about this design in detail and go through the authentication flows, all right? So here's the topology. It's basically the same one as the other visual, but I have a few extra details. So this is what I refer to as a hybrid, the traditional hybrid setup, okay? So key things to note. So you've got, where's my pointer? It's very difficult to see. Okay, here we go. So Exchange is in hybrid, so it knows Exchange Online and Exchange On-Prem know about each other. Same thing for Skype for Business, okay? The online servers trust AAD. That's what these orange lines are, trust lines, okay? So online trusts AAD. On-prem trusts on-prem identity, okay? And in a standard hybrid setup, you are syncing all of your users from on-prem to online, okay? And that's what they refer to as federation, as federated identity. Okay, for authentication, the important thing to understand about this topology is that the first point of authentication for any of your users, regardless of where they're homed, is the on-prem server. That's because Link Discover and Auto Discover point to on-prem, okay? So even if the user is completely online and has a mailbox online, the first place they're going to go when they try to authenticate is on-premise, okay? All right, let's move on. So this is the traditional architecture. In order to turn on modern auth for on-prem, you have to move to this different architecture. And the difference between this one and what I just showed you is those two lines right there, okay? What we're doing in this new architecture is having the on-prem servers trust the online identity. That does a couple of things. First of all, the scenario, our online servers use online identity and have for years, and we have hundreds of thousands of users using this all the time. Okay, so we're very confident in this solution. We know that it works. Basically, we're making our on-prem servers act like our online servers, okay? And what this does for the user is it reduces the number of prompts they get. Because once they have signed in and they've gotten tokens from AAD, then any other time that they need to sign into any one of these 4 servers, they already have those tokens and the user is not prompted, okay? The reason in some of the older stuff you got multiple prompts is because there were 2 identity systems in play, okay? Another nice thing about this design is that it does not require the latest version of ADFS. You can use ADFS on Windows 2012 and you'll be just fine. So you don't have to like revamp your whole ADFS deployment. And actually, we support this with any on-prem STS that Office 365 supports. It doesn't have to be ADFS. It can be Ping Federate or, I don't know, whatever else is out there. Okay, yay for Ping Federate. Okay, and then what this allows you to do is turn on modern authentication in the on-prem servers, which is the whole goal of this. All right, so now I'm going to walk through the authentication flow. So here you've got a client. It looks like a mobile client, but this flow is accurate for all of the Skype for Business clients, okay? All of them work this way. In this example, my user is hosted online for Skype for Business and has a mailbox in Exchange Online, okay? I picked that example because that's the most complicated flow. Anyway, so let's get started. So what happens is, first of all, Link Discover will tell the client, go to SFB on-prem. So the client goes there, says, hey, I want to log in, and the server looks at that trust line, okay, that orange line, and says, I trust AAD. Go to AAD and get a token and then come back to me, all right? So the client goes to AAD and says, hey, I want to get in, and then AAD says, I trust ADFS. You see that trust line between AAD and ADFS? That's your federated identity, okay? So AAD says, go to ADFS. ADFS, the client goes there, and then the user will get prompted for credentials. The credentials that they provide will depend on how you have ADFS configured. So if you want CBA, they can provide a cert. If you want username and password, they can provide a password, etc. All right? So the user enters their credentials, they get verified, and then ADFS will send a token back to the client. The client will take that token, go back to AAD, provide it to AAD, and then AAD will say, great, you're good to go, and here are your modern auth tokens. Okay, so they provide 2 tokens to the client, a client access token and a refresh token. Now at this point, the client can go back to where they started, which was SFB on-prem, say, here are the tokens that you asked for, and on-prem will validate the token signing authority. On-prem will go to AAD and validate the token signing authority, come back and say, great, you're in, I know you're good, everything's awesome, I'll let you in, let me look you up. Oh, you know what? You're actually hosted online. This user is hosted online. So go back, go to online, go to here, okay? So now the client goes to online, and online says, looks at its trust flow, okay, and says, oh, you want to get into me? Okay, go, I trust AAD. Go to AAD and get a token from them. So the client goes to AAD. Now, at this point, the client already has the tokens from the first time it went through this, right? When it did it. Yes. So what it can do is send a refresh token to AAD, get back a client access token. Yes, I got ahead of myself there. And then go back to Skype for Business Online. And now at this point, the user is logged into Skype for Business, okay? Yes, I know, but wait, we're not done, okay? So hang on. Okay, so one other key thing to understand is, so I'm signed into Skype for Business, and now the Skype for Business server, the online server, will provide a cert to the client, a Skype for Business specific cert. This will be more relevant as I talk. Okay, so now I'm signed into Skype for Business. I have to go through the exact same thing for Exchange, all right, for EWS. So now, how does that work? Well, the client, auto discovery points the client to Exchange on-prem. So Exchange on-prem, the client says, I want to get in. Exchange says, great, I trust AAD, go there. The client goes to AAD. Now the client has already got tokens for AAD. So it sends the refresh token, it will get back a client access token, and now we can take that access token to Exchange on-prem. Exchange on-prem says, great, I know who you are, let me look you up. Oh, guess what? You're hosted online. Go to online. Okay? So the client goes to whoops, I think I went too far. Yeah. So it gets redirected to Exchange Online. Exchange Online says, oh, you want to get in? Well, I trust AAD. Go there. So the client goes to AAD. It's already got tokens. It gives those to AAD. It gets back a client refresh token. And now the client can go back to Exchange Online and get in to Exchange Online. Okay? So that is the flow. Now, so that's what I mean. So there's 4 potential places that you auth, right? Those 4 servers. And that's why you need modern auth turned on for all 4 of them, okay? Now, this does not mean that the user is actually prompted all of these times, okay? How many times did the user get prompted? Did anybody? Right, 1, okay? That's what's great about this design, is that the most the user will get prompted is 1 time, okay? Okay. Let's talk some more about the tokens and the certs and the lifetimes, because this is really important to understand. So the AAD provides 2 tokens, the 2 modern auth tokens, the client access token and the refresh token. The client access token has a lifetime of 1 hour. The refresh token has a lifetime of 90 days by default. It's, they're making it configurable. I think they've made it configurable. Okay? So basically what happens is you need the client access token to actually get into the servers, to get into the resource that you want. And that expires every hour. So every hour the client goes and uses the refresh token that it has to go get another client access token. Okay, so that's happening all the time under the covers. Meanwhile, for the Skype for Business client specifically, so that's just how AAD works in general. Okay, that's true for like all the other Exchange, SharePoint, everything, anything that's using AAD and their modern authentication tokens. That's true for them. Skype for Business specifically has got a cert that it gives to the client, all right? And the cert, if you get it from the online server, its lifetime is 8 hours. If you get it from the on-prem server, by default, its lifetime is 180 days, okay? But it's configurable. And this is, the reason it's like this, the reason it's so long is because traditionally, before online even came into the picture, when we were just an on-premise server, we had to strike a balance between reliability, okay? The thing is, with something like, because SFB is a real-time workload, right? Like if your IM doesn't happen, if you have a break in the IM for 30 seconds, you're gonna notice. If you have that for Exchange, you don't notice, okay? But anyway, so these lifetimes were configured, were designed this way in order to ensure that you can still be connected. So while you have this cert and it's good, you can still connect. The client can connect to the server without having to go through the entire authentication flow, okay? So that's the lifetime of this cert. So the re-auth process, the client will re-auth when this cert expires, okay? When this cert expires, and if the refresh token has expired, that's when the client will go back to AAD and say, and prompt the user and make them go through the entire flow again, all right? Okay, turning on hybrid modern auth. So to turn this on, it's a global setting. This is true for Exchange and Skype for Business. You cannot do it per user or per pool, okay? A lot of people have asked us for that. I understand it. Even our own, our Microsoft IT wants this, and we completely understand that you would prefer not to have a global setting. The reason we don't do it that way is because in order to make that happen, it would actually cause a security hole, which we don't think is the right thing to do. Anyway, so it is a global setting. When you turn that on, what you're actually doing is adding OAuth, modern authentication, to the list of protocols that the server can support, all right? It does not disable older protocols, because some people get confused by that. What that means is that if you have a client that is not ADAL aware, doesn't have ADAL, because all the modern clients do, but older clients don't, okay? They will still be able to get in. They'll be able to log in, but they're not using modern authentication to log in. They're using legacy auth to get in, all right? So for example, if you have room systems, Skype room systems, or IP phones, they do not support ADAL today, all right? So, but they'll still be able to log in, but you can't use the modern authentication features with them. So the steps themselves, it's basically you run a couple of commandlets for Exchange and SFB. Now, what happens when you actually turn it on? What does not happen is it does not cause a re-auth for every single Skype for Business client you have out there, okay? Which I'm sure you're happy about, because you really don't want, you know, got 100,000 people in your deployment, you really don't want them at the same moment to have to re-auth, right? That would cause a big problem. What happens is that the next time that the client needs to re-auth, based on the lifetime of the tokens and the certs that it has, all right? The next time it re-auths, it will use the new authentication method, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, let's talk about the prereqs. So first of all, you have to have federated identity with AAD and all of your users syncing to AAD, okay? And I hope by now it's pretty obvious because we use AAD as our identity. For Skype for Business Server, you need 2015 CU5 and greater. You cannot have any coexistence, mainly because before this release, it didn't know how to do this, okay? So you have to have this release. You can't have Link 2013 or Link 2010. The only exception is for the survivable branch appliance. If any of you guys use that, you can use the current one out there. It will continue to work. Exchange. For Exchange, you can use, it's supported. This is supported on 2013 and 2016. On 2013, you need CU15 plus. On 2016, you need CU5 plus. I'll tell you that Exchange, I think they're they're now like on CU17 and CU7, maybe, I'm not sure. Basically, Exchange's support statement for hybrid, they say if you're in a hybrid Exchange deployment, we support current CU and -1, okay? So now we've gotten to the point where ideally you should be on the current or the -1, which is past this. The important thing for Exchange is that you cannot have 2010. You cannot have 2010 anywhere in your environment, okay? Even if you have no users hosted with mailboxes on 2010, you cannot have 2010. My partner, my Exchange partner for this project is speaking Friday at 11:30. I have it later in the deck. So if you have Exchange questions and you want to understand the Exchange part better, please go to his session, okay? His name is Greg Taylor. And the other thing is, we do not yet support having Exchange in a resource forest. This will be supported, but right now it's a known issue, okay? All right. Oh, and on-prem STS, I think I already talked about this, but basically any on-prem STS that's supported by Office 365, and if it's ADFS, we want it to be 3.0 or greater, which is Windows 2012 R2 and above. Okay, licensing, there's no special licensing that you need for this, okay? Just your hybrid license will be perfectly fine. Okay, I believe I've talked through all this stuff except for the third one. So, do you have to enable any ports on the Skype for Business server? The answer is yes, because the front ends, basically this is what you have to do. The front ends need to talk to the internet. They have to be able to get to AAD. To check the token signing authority, do you remember that in my flow diagram? So they need to be able to get to the internet, all right? So if you don't have that today, that will be a problem. I mean, you have to make that happen. As far as the ports, so the question is it specific ports? So it's not a specific, it's basically whatever, like there's an article out there that says what ports you need to enable, okay, in general, for hybrid to work. Those are the ports that you need. There's nothing special for this design, okay? All right, and we are reducing those ports in general, if you haven't seen already, so that's good news. So that was the hybrid design, right? And like I said earlier, we are currently working on this also, enabling on-premise, but with using AAD as the authorization server. So this design, it's basically a subset of what I already went through, all right? It works the same way, except that, so the auth flow, the only difference is the user is not redirected to online because there is no user in online, right? The prereqs are exactly the same. The one difference is with the licensing. You have to have at least one person with an Office 365 license assigned. And specifically, that the Office 365 license has to include Exchange and Skype for Business. Okay. The reason you have to do that is because what you have to do is configure. AAD needs to know the on-prem web URLs, okay? That's part of the configuration. But in order to do that, AAD needs to know what tenant that's for, and doesn't know the on-prem tenant. So you have to, by assigning that one license, basically a bunch of stuff happens in the back end, so that you get, essentially, you get a tenant provisioned, a very minimal one, but you need that to be able to do the configuration, okay? But you don't have to have any person hosted online. Okay. All right, that was a lot of stuff. I don't know what time it is. What time is it? There's no clock in here. Okay, so I've got 3 minutes, right? Okay, awesome. So let me talk about Teams for a second. Teams is much simpler, all right, which is really nice. Yes. Okay, as far as topologies go, there's only one topology, online. Teams is only available online. There is no on-prem, and therefore there's no hybrid, okay? And here's the features and clients that get supported. Here's the matrix, okay? And that's all I have to say about that. And oh, and Teams, by the way, it's the only type of authentication does is modern authentication. It doesn't do the legacy auth stuff, okay? So you don't have to think about that at all. All right. Oh, this did not get my latest slides. Shoot. Okay. Anyway, so few resources. So to join the TAP program, which I'd love to have you join, or the public preview program, you go to aka.Skype preview. Other Ignite sessions, I have this written down actually. So the one for Exchange is called BRK4001. Okay. It's on Friday at like 11:30. There's one tomorrow, Thursday at 4. That's about troubleshooting authentication in Office 365. You will see a lot of similar things to what I said in that session. It kind of focuses on Outlook, but it's really a good session. And the documents, so this first document is the one I talked about, the supportability document that has all the that has the visuals for all the things that we support. And the last two are documents that explain features that are supported in our clients, and we've recently added the modern auth stuff in there, okay? And so as we move forward, I will update these documents. As we add more topologies that we support and features that we support, this is where we will update the documentation, okay? So we are technically out of time. Hang on. Don't forget to do your evaluation. And I am happy to answer questions, and I will be at the Skype for Business booth in the expo all afternoon, so you can also come find me there. But go ahead and ask questions if you have any.